Siegel, one of the attorneys for Deborah Goodman. We're here today to announce that we filed this morning in the United States District Court, the Southern District of New York, what we consider to be an important, perhaps a historic lawsuit. Now, why is this important? It's important because recording government officials, especially law enforcement officials, helps to ensure that government officials, in particular law enforcement, the NYPD, remain accountable to the public. Numerous instances in the last few years in New York City where individuals took out their smartphone and began to record police activity where the police were violating someone's civil rights. In those instances, the police then turn on the individual who's recording the police activity and threaten to arrest them. In some instances, unbelievably, turn on that individual and physically assault them and arrest them. We are challenging that kind of practice, that policy and custom. We think that that is unconstitutional. Other courts, the First Circuit, which is Boston, New Hampshire, Maine, the Seventh Circuit, which is the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, the Ninth Circuit, which is the West Coast, and the 11th Circuit, which is the Deep South, have already said that there is a First Amendment right for citizens to record the police. But the Second Circuit, which is the New York area, New York, Connecticut, that's not clearly established. Deborah Goodman, who did this on the West Side, West 73rd and Broadway, was attempting to record the police interacting, EMS interacting with what apparently was a homeless woman in a wheelchair. As a good citizen, she took out her smartphone and began to attempt to record this. The police came over to her, basically telling her she can't do this. She knew her rights and said she did have a right to do this. The officer then took out his cell phone attempting to record her. She told them that they can't do that. The next thing you know, she's arrested, thrown into the car, abused, 25 hours detained. We had to go 5 times to the criminal court before the case was dismissed. All of this is part of the pattern to intimidate, to chill New Yorkers from recording the police engage in their police activity. And again, it's crucial that this activity is allowed because it's protected under the First Amendment, and second, in a democracy, we have to have this accountability. We are cautiously optimistic now that we have a new mayor, Bill de Blasio, as well as, once again, a new police commissioner, Bill Bratton. I know both. I think that they're different than their predecessors, and we're cautiously optimistic that rather than fighting us tooth and nail, they might recognize that what we're saying is correct legally and as a policy matter, and work with us to make sure that there is a constitutional right in New York City for people to record police activity. And second, as they did in Baltimore with the assistance of the Department of Justice, that they begin to develop training material and training activity both in the precinct and at the academy to make sure that people understand that there is a constitutional right. And what happened to her happens to other people in these situations. The federal court can say and declare that they have a First Amendment right, and that when the police are filming her and she's filming them, that's retaliatory action under the First Amendment. But most important, we're asking for a permanent injunction to enjoin the police department in the city of New York from threatening to arrest people. There are some instances where the officers tell people to delete the video with a picture on their smartphone. And there's one instance where they make a deal with the person that they won't prosecute the individual if he deletes the information off his smartphone. That's clearly a violation of the 4th and 14th Amendment because that is his property or her property, and the government can't require someone to delete that property off their smartphone, especially when that video or that picture is showing a government official violating someone's civil rights. So we will pursue this wherever it goes to the Second Circuit, even since there's disputes among the circuits. A case like this and this issue could wind up eventually in the U.S. Supreme Court to get clarity nationally with regard to this. Deborah Goodman is the human face on the issue of police abuse with regard to threatening and arresting people for recording them. I want to make sure that everyone understands that we're not advocating this right if the individual who's recording the police interferes or obstructs the police officer in her or his official duties. Facts here are ripe for the test case that we're talking about. And again, we hope that Mayor de Blasio and Police Commissioner de Blasio and Police Commissioner Bratton will work with us in trying to amicably resolve this. It gives me great honor to introduce two co-counsel that are here, Sharon Spray-Reagan and Herbert Teitelbaum. Herb will talk, and then Deborah will talk about the situation.
Hi, I'm Herb Teitelbaum, and I'm one of the lawyers representing Ms. Goodman in this litigation. You know, you have to ask yourself, why is it that in places like Baltimore, Indianapolis, Boston, and in this particular instance, New York City, where it is so widespread that police officers don't want citizens like Ms. Goodman to record what is happening with interactions between a police officer and a citizen. Well, there are so many instances, too many instances, in which a citizen is mistreated, where a citizen's civil rights are violated, and then an excuse is offered by the police officer, and it boils down to the word of the police officer and the word of the private citizen. In this instance, reporting what happens creates incontrovertible evidence that civil rights are being violated. And that, perhaps, is a motive for this widespread unconstitutional behavior. Thank you.
Finally, the person who's brought the lawsuit will tell you about what happened, how she feels about it. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce you, Deborah Goodman.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank my attorneys who are all wonderful, and I couldn't do it without them. On the night of September 25th, 2013, when I was on my way home from the subway, I was walking across Broadway to 73rd Street, and I saw a woman in a wheelchair who appeared to be homeless. So I noticed that EMT workers were talking to her, and I walked a few steps further and saw that there were 3 police officers there, kind of looking towards the woman and the EMT officers. So I stepped beyond them. That's fake, sir. So I walked beyond the police officers, and I attempted to record them. And as soon as a police officer noticed I was doing that, he approached me and held up his smartphone as if he was recording me. And I told him that he didn't have a right to do that because he was a police officer performing his services in public, and that therefore he wasn't really covered under the First Amendment at that time. But me as a private citizen is completely covered. So we had some words. He asked me to produce ID. I refused because I knew I wasn't doing anything was detained for about 25 hours. I told them that I needed to take my medication. I'm a cancer patient, and I had breast cancer surgery. I told them a bunch of things. I told them that I needed to take medication, that I couldn't miss it. This is a medication that I must take. I also told them that with the handcuffs behind my back, it caused spasms in certain positions and behind. When I was brought to St. Luke's and also to central booking, I was handcuffed with my cuffs behind my back and also shackled at the ankle. And the shackles were very tight and left a blood blister. It was very painful. I told them that it was painful. I also thought they put the shackles on wrong, so each step caused me to trip. And it was pretty humiliating and horrifying. I was finally arraigned some 25 hours later, and then we went to court on several occasions to appear as requested on 5 different occasions. And finally, after the 5th appearance, the charges were dropped, and I decided that it would be a good idea to bring a suit to see if we could support an individual's legal right to film the police while they're out in public performing their duty, and to establish that every individual has that right as long as they're not interfering with an investigation or whatever's going on with the police. And I think it's important enough, and I also think that it's really important because it fosters accountability, and I do think that it lessens police misconduct. When police know they're being filmed, they're likely to be on their best behavior, and that's exactly what we want.
Okay, thank you. If there's any questions formally, or you'll hang around informally for any one-on-one interviews, especially with Deborah. Any questions?
What are your chances of success?
We're pretty confident legally, especially with the precedent from the first 7th, 9th, and 11th Court of Appeals. I think that will happen. There's some previous cases where people have brought stuff in the district court, and the court says, although we're inclined to agree with the circuits, the Second Circuit has not established that right. So I think legally we're in good shape. And second, just as a policy matter, we will know the stories will get reactions from people. Our sense is that this makes absolute sense. That as long as you're not interfering with the police doing their job, why can't you report it? There's a case called, I was involved in Black versus Scott at the Civil Liberties Union many years ago. I hate to tell you how many years ago it was because it dates me. But in the context of that decision, we established the right for onlookers to observe police doing their job as long as we interfere. So this is just an extension of Black versus Cod. The only difference here is that we're now introducing the smartphone. And I don't think legally or as a policy matter, the introduction of the smartphone makes any difference, except it's what Herb said. When you have the smartphone, it memorializes the misconduct, and that becomes evidence in the case. And that's perhaps, as Herb said, is the motive where they want to make sure that that memorialization of the abuse is erased. I think that most people will say that if we don't interfere, record it, and as Deborah said, it could reduce the amount of allegations of police misconduct, because once somebody knows, for example, when I know this camera's on, I'm a little more careful on my words than if the camera wasn't there.
So in the previous rulings in the district court, have judges ruled against plaintiffs like Deborah?
Well, in 2 cases that we're aware of, Ortiz and Mesa, what happened is that the case was dismissed because on the context of immunity for the officers, the court said that the Second Circuit did not clearly establish the First Amendment law. But second, those lawsuits, one which was pro se, they really didn't develop the municipal liability argument. And second, you'll see in the complaint we have more than a half a dozen specific instances in the last couple of years where this occurred. And the court talks about pervasive and widespread activity. We think we have that. And second, we'll keep in touch with you every year. Assuming your editors allow the stories to run, what will happen is that we'll get lots of phone calls in the next couple of days from people who say, that happened to me as well. The more we can show that this is systemic, the more our chances are successful. But in Baltimore, the police department, after the lawsuit was filed, began to cooperate and reach an amicable settlement with the ACLU and the Department of Justice. If Baltimore can do it, New York City should do it as well. We shouldn't have to run up the attorney's fees. We shouldn't have to take 2 years to establish this right. The mayor and the police commissioner should announce that they're going to do this. Final point. The patrol guide, as we mentioned in the complaint, has a provision that says that taking photographs and filming of the police is not grounds per se for probable cause for an arrest. So the patrol guide recognizes this, but as in Baltimore, the Justice Department rightly told the court, it's not adequate for you just to be in the patrol guide. You have to establish it as a constitutional right, because you can remove it from the patrol guide, you can't remove it from the Constitution.
Very ethics. That's particularly important. What you lay out in the complaint is that police officers need to be trained. They need to be sensitized to these constitutional rights. So these kinds of instances just don't happen. And at least now, we believe that there is no such training taking place in New York City. In Baltimore, one of the things that was done was they launched a training program. And that's what we're asking for.
On what charges were you arrested on?
I was arrested with obstructing governmental administration, disorderly conduct, harassment in the second degree, and resisting arrest.
Okay, no worry, man. So I kept the job.
And all those
Want to repeat
charges
that?
No, it's still going on. Going underneath.
and all those charges,
Yeah, so I'm here.
all of those charges were dismissed.
It's still going on. You need some